Welcome to What It Takes, a podcast built to provide valuable insights for people just like you. Here we discuss industry-specific details of what it takes to navigate a journey of professional success from those that have already done it. We're not here to be vague. We're here to get to the nitty-gritty of it all. And today we're here to get to the nitty-gritty of what it takes to become financially independent at a young age with our guest, Avery Heilbronn. Tom, tell us. Oh, thank you. I know that was tough.
You said it right. All right.
Tom, tell us about Avery.
Yeah, so we actually asked Avery a few questions. So Avery, you're from Vancouver, Washington, right?
Canada, actually.
Oh, Vancouver, Canada. Okay,
yeah.
I was about to say I lived in Vancouver,
Canadian.
Washington. But,
Okay,
Canadian. I love it. Some of your interests, you love soccer, reading, cooking. In fact, I saw a few of your social media posts where you had a soccer ball you're dribbling around. You've got your mom, dad, brother. You got brother and a sister. Currently you live in Durham, North Carolina, which me and Keaton are from Wake Forest, North Carolina. We grew up there, best friends. Your small business and your ventures, social media and real estate, which I can say your social media posts on real estate are phenomenal. I love them. And then you started right after college. Right now, what the business partners that you have that help you is Mia, your girlfriend. She helps out with the design aspect, renovations, and furniture, right? Mm-hmm. And then this one is blowing me away, but your cumulative gross revenue is between $400,000 and $450,000 a year. So very, very impressive. And we appreciate you being on the podcast, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And when Keaton reached out, I really liked the premise for the podcast, what it takes, because often people, especially my age, who I work with might say, I can't do this or everything's against me. So the idea of how can I do it or what does it take to do it, I think really resonates.
Well, thank you. And that's why me and Tom have been in business 4 years together, known each other for I don't know how long, too long.
20 years? More than 20 years? Yeah.
We've definitely had ups and downs in figuring a lot of things out. And it feels like just these last 6 months to a year, we finally started getting the ball rolling. And I think even I don't know if it was in 2022 planning, I was talking to Tom's wife and I was like, Catherine, we're going to make $1 this year. We're going to do it because we've had these plans. We put a lot of dollars out there, but we hadn't made $1 really yet. And then we finally started picking up a little steam. So we've made a lot of mistakes and we've learned a lot, but there's people out there like you that I feel like, and I'm going to ask you this here soon, but that can benefit from our experience. And I think we're a little age advanced past you. And that brings me to the question, how old are you, Avery?
I just turned 28 earlier this year. So January of this year. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you feel old, Keaton?
That's I every time you said that last time when who was it? Steve said he was 27.
Steve's 26. 26 and running his own carpentry and construction business. Yeah.
I guess in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm right there, but I'm 6 years past it.
No, that's a lot. Yeah.
But Avery, yeah, so glad to have you on. What made you interested or made you take an interest in finance and personal finance and your personal financial being?
Yeah, so I think growing up, my parents were always pretty frugal people. We never spent crazy lavishly. They're pretty smart with their money. I guess kind of Dave Ramsey-esque in that way, but not really interested in debt and that whole deal that I've become more interested in with investing in real estate. So, my whole life, I've kind of almost felt sick to my stomach when I would pay for stuff, which I felt like as I got older and started earning more money, that might go away. And it definitely has gone away. I remember when I was first out of school and I wanted to buy a beer and I'm like, why am I spending $6, $7 on this? This is terrible. And as I've made a little bit more money and tried to think about things differently, I've gotten over that a little bit. But, as I got out of school, I knew I didn't really want to work forever. I remember coming home from work one day. I lived with my brother at the time in Boston. And I was like, that was a week of work and it's Friday. And then Monday's coming up and then there's 40 more years of that, huh? And he kind of laughed and, most people laugh that off. They keep doing it. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that forever. And I ended up playing in a men's league where I sprained my ankle, ended up going to the bookstore because I had so much free time. and I picked up a book called Retire on Real Estate. And it just started talking a little bit about how you could utilize real estate as something for your retirement or to supplement your retirement. And then it also mentioned bigger pockets. And then it really just spiraled from there. And there were a ton of books that I read. So, and that was right after college when I started getting into that.
And tell us about college. I want to get into those books and what you read, but where'd you go to college? What'd you study?
So first I went to the University of New Hampshire, and it was pretty random. Played college soccer, and all I really cared about was playing Division I sports. Played my first year. We got a new coach. He didn't really like me too much, so I transferred to a really small college in Maine called Colby, like a really tiny 2,000 person school. Still played soccer there, which was pretty fun. Studied math, statistics, and then I just ended up getting a job in the Boston area after that.
And so what was your degree in?
Math and statistics, and then I did a minor in economics.
Okay, yeah, you're a super smart dude.
I
struggled
through math.
Hey, that's okay to even take on that type of a degree. I think is admirable. You know, you get the other people that are like, I'm just going to do physical science and teach gym class. That was my kind of college education. But okay, so great. You graduate, get out. You're tired of the 9-to-5 job. You pick up this book. Was there something specific about the book that just popped and you were like, this is me. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into real estate.
Yeah, I think I always had a little bit of an inkling for real estate because when I was at the University of New Hampshire, I remember we had a soccer house and it was a real dump and, 3-bedroom house. And the guys told me we're paying $3,200 a month to live here. And I was like, that's insane. I would love to be on the other side of that one day.
Yeah.
So kind of in my head, I always thought about it a little bit. I didn't know how to execute on it. Or some of the advantages that being in the US has with all of the loan types that just make it a lot more easy for people to do it compared to some other places. So that in and alone, I was kind of had that background interest. And then this book just mentioned bigger pockets, which if people aren't familiar, basically like the social media for real estate investors. And they have all of these books and forums. And I just reached out to a bunch of people on there and started listening to their podcasts all the time and just soak up as much information as possible.
Wow. That's it. Just soaked up the information and took the plunge. What year, maybe give me a timeline. You're 28 now. How long ago was it when you took kind of your first plunge into the loan world and saying, hey, I'm going to try to finance my first property?
Yeah. So I graduated in 2018. I have an early birthday and I did an extra year of high school because of sports. So I was 23 when I graduated, I think. Yeah, 24 when I bought my first property, 23 when I graduated. So it was like August of 2018 when I found that book and started researching a lot more into real estate and I basically read the Brandon Turner book where he talked about low money down options to buy a property. You mentioned FHA house hack, and then I stopped reading and was like, yeah,
this is for me. This is it.
Yeah, I didn't even finish that book. I think I read that chapter and was like, yep, we'll do it.
Yeah, which I was going through a few of your TikTok videos. You have a ton of videos on like the FHA hack. So if you haven't checked out Avery's TikTok, check it out. He's got a bunch of shorts, but I know some longer explanations on YouTube. Sorry, Keaton, go ahead.
I was going to say, Dawson, can you show that book real quick? From Brandon Turner. And then also, which we'll get talking to more later, but shout out to Avery. I'm an Instagram consumer. I don't even have TikTok. I know Tom has TikTok, but you're on Instagram, TikTok. What else are you on?
So I actually started on YouTube in January 2021. And actually prior to that, about 3 or 4 months before, I did DIY YouTube videos because I learned so much about construction through watching those. And I figured I would do some myself. And I realized I did not have the patience to make them because I was just trying to do the work, and explaining it took forever. So I just
you got to stop, recut. Hey, here's what I did here. Pause. Next thing you know, what was supposed to take 2 hours took you 6 hours.
Yeah, which I'm always so impressed with those guys who have the pages where it's their job, like some plumbers or electricians. I'm like, how are you doing commentary on this and filming it and doing the work? It's pretty crazy.
Smart
guys. There's one guy I follow, Winnie Designs. I think he's awesome, but he goes after it and he posts so much content, and you can tell he's full-time into whatever he is. But that's another subject for another day. This first house you bought, how much did it cost you? And you talked about the FHA loan. What were the logistics? how did you go about getting it? I know you said this book kind of introduced you to it. How did it all come to fruition?
Yeah, so I guess just to follow up the timeline a little bit, after I read that book, some of the things that people mentioned in Bigger Pockets was to go to a lot of meetups. So if you're looking for, other people to talk to, meetup.com is great. And you can just type in real estate investing in the area that you're in, and there's usually something there. And in Boston, there were a ton. So I went to one, and that's where I met the real estate agent, and he had done the same kind of things and was investing himself. So I knew he'd be a good person to talk to, and he represented a bunch of people who were doing the exact same thing. And the Boston area, the Northeast, is pretty littered with 2 to 4 unit multifamily buildings. So it seemed like a pretty easy next step to go through. So we started looking in August or right around September. And I said, hey, I'm not pre-approved yet. I don't have the funds. He's like, no worries. We'll go look at houses. I'll just teach you what to look for, which was really awesome. Because again, it felt like I was wasting his time, but we would go in the basement and he would just like teach me everything about construction and like walk around, tell me how much stuff cost or if this would be good for the first deal or not. So he was a really valuable resource. And then basically a few months elapsed or a bit longer than that. And I finally had a pre-approval because I then had a credit score, because I didn't get a credit card until July of was 2018, until after I graduated. So I still was building the credit. And pretty much what happened is I went and saw one property that I ended up buying, but it was under contract with a full cash offer, and it was listed for $550. This full cash offer got it for $535. And then it was off the market, wasn't something I could get to. And I was feeling pretty discouraged because I had put in a few offers, and me being impatient, I think is probably the best word. I'm like, oh, I put in 3 offers. Why am I not a millionaire yet? So I was thinking, is this going to happen? Trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then that deal ended up falling through. And the reason I realized that and knew about it is because the listing agent, because I had been going to all these networking events, knew me and knew what I wanted to do. So he called me and said, hey, we are out of contract. I know you saw this place a couple months ago. It's yours if you want it. And my max pre-approval was $525. So that's what I had to offer. So wow. I got it under contract at that. And I later learned that the seller was doing a 1031 exchange. So he only had so much time. He accepted my offer before it came back on the market and didn't really have time to do that. So it ended up kind of falling in my lap almost.
The stars really aligned, but I mean, they didn't, you put them in place by that networking. You gave us a few golden nuggets there that I hope we can expound on, but taking the time, I don't know, these meetups that you mentioned, how much do they cost? Were they costing, or are they just free and networking and you meet together? How'd that work?
There's a variety of them, and I'd probably, especially if you're newer, lean away from the ones that cost anything. Okay. People are probably trying to sell something. And that's actually a big reason why I started one of my own, because I just like most of the time you would go to them. Sometimes they were just at a brewery or a bar and just talking the whole time. Those were awesome. Other times it'd be 10, 15 minutes of networking. A lender and a real estate agent team or a CPA or someone would give a speech. And it was a speech about how you would use their services come the end, which is fine sometimes. And then the last 15 minutes would also be some type of networking. But I really just cared about the networking part. Mm-hmm. So I would try to focus on going to those ones that were free. And other people felt the same. And that's also why I started my own, so that it was just purely networking at a brewery, just trying to meet people.
So do you do that once a week? Do you do it once a month? What's that network look like?
Typically, people hold them once a month. There were so many in Boston that I think prior to the pandemic, I was going to like 2 or 3 a week.
Wow.
Where I live now in Durham, there's not nearly as many. So I might go to 1 or 2 a month.
Okay. Now, what about yours? You said you set up one though. Tell me about yours.
Yeah. So it was going really successfully. I started doing a couple of podcasts and was really active on Bigger Pockets. So anytime someone mentioned the Boston area, I would message them and just say like, hey, here's my meetup, come join. And it started growing pretty good. We did 3 or 4 of them, and we were going to start expanding into a bigger brewery. They were going to give us a section of it, like microphone and stuff. And really what I wanted to do was, for the microphone, is everyone would get like 30 seconds to say who they were. Mm-hmm. And maybe you could connect with someone after those 30 seconds. But then the next the next meetup was March 2020. So
Nice.
Oh, here comes COVID.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, geez.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that really stopped all of that. And then I moved from Boston down to North Carolina, and yeah, obviously wasn't going to pick it back up. I actually know one of my old friends did pick it back up, and he's still running it. So
okay. Are there meetups online that are good for people to know about, or most of these are, hey, you really got to get down face to face with people?
Yeah, so meetup.com, that's a great place that you'll find
Mhm.
them online. Some people still do Zoom ones, or Bigger Pockets itself will have, I think it's like biggerpockets.com/events or backslash, I can't remember. And then you can look up your specific location, and sometimes there'll be some, depending on where you live.
So you mentioned Bigger Pockets quite a few times. Forgive my ignorance, but so did you learn that from the book that you read, and then, or that first book that you talked about you read, and then is it just that's a whole networking scene, or what is Bigger Pockets?
Yeah, so Bigger Pockets is like, I think Facebook is probably the best way to describe it in a way, but it's not like people are posting photos or anything. It's a lot of forum posts. And the guy who started it, I think he started it back in like 05 or 06, sometime then. And he was just a new landlord, and he didn't really know what he was doing. So he's like, hey, I guess it's more like Reddit, where you have a forum and people are asking questions, but it's not as faceless as Reddit. So people still have profiles. And you're like, hey, my tenant did this, what should I do? Or I'm in this area and I need a real estate agent or a lender, kind of thing. And the reason why I was so interested in the networking is because, I was listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast. So they have 3 or 4 different ones now. Mm-hmm. Some real estate related, some more beginner real estate, one's purely about financial independence. And on the main real estate one, I think it was every few episodes, people just mentioned, you just got to network with people. You're just going to learn so much more and see what people are doing in your area. What they did to make it work, like what it took for them, coming back to the theme of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it.
Like how did they actually do it? Because again, you're at the beginning, you're like, I don't know what to do. Someone might be able to tell you.
Well, and most of the time people, when you ask their story of you bought a real estate, bought property, they're like, oh yeah, I just went to the bank, signed a paper, and next thing I know, I own the property. And that's the whole reason why me and Keaton put this podcast together was, no. I want to know, like, what did you actually sign? Like, what was the loan? How much was it for? How much did you have to put down? What did that property generate? Could you use the income against the property value? Things like that. So that's incredible. Now, if you could point someone towards Bigger Pockets, or for example, I know me and Keaton follow a bunch of Facebook page where people talk about their Airbnbs and stuff. Would you say Bigger Pockets, people are sharing more details?
I think it's a bit of a broader spectrum, and you'll get some random feedback. Those Facebook groups are great, and I'm part of a lot of short-term rental ones. Especially,
yeah, but most of the time, what I see is like, these guys trashed my place. What should I do?
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's much more like management based rather than purchase based, right? So I can learn how to maybe manage better an Airbnb to say, hey, here's how I handled this situation with this tenant or this guest. But I don't feel like I gain a lot of knowledge on, okay, well, where did you find that property? How did you do it? And how did you buy it? But Bigger Pockets, you can find that there.
Like recently, I learned a lot more about some of the customizations you can set up in Price Labs to make your pricing a lot better. So that's something that I probably wouldn't have learned from those Facebook groups. But that was me just reaching out to a random person on Instagram who talked about it.
Price Labs. What is Price Labs?
So Price Labs is just a dynamic pricing software. I can't remember. I have 2 listings. I think I pay now $30 a month for it. So as you get more listings, the cost per listing is lower. And you would just put in your Airbnb and VRBO listing, and it combines them into one. If you also had Booking.com or however many other sites there are, and put it into one. And usually you can mark up. So for example, Vrbo they take more of a fee. So you can just mark up the Vrbo prices within there, and it'll take whatever's happening. So for example, one of my properties is in Pinehurst, and there's US Kids Golf Open. So in July, my prices are like $700 a night, but not because I set it, because Price Lab set it and they understand what the demand is. They'll do weekday pricing, weekend pricing, and you can do further customizations to say, hey, we're 60 days from this date. Let's make it 15% more expensive, because if someone's booking from that far away, might as well try it.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's 3 days in between some bookings, you can really shoot the price down to make it more likely to get booked. And rather than you going in and manually doing that for every single one, it just, you can create.
It's exhausting to go in and manually like
So
adjust things.
do they do it all for you, or do you communicate with them, or do they do that research for you?
So you would be the one figuring out what customizations you would want to add.
Okay.
And it would be specific to your property because certain things would be a certain way. And like, for example, one I saw some guy I know in like January and February, December, basically after the holiday, would like to get a minimum, like you can set minimum night stays, which I recently learned about and I really like, because if someone books Christmas and they only book 2 days, no one's going to book either side of Christmas for your Airbnb. But if you make the minimum, 4 or 5 nights, then you're going to make more revenue because there's not going to be 2 Christmas bookings most likely.
Right.
So that's a pretty awesome thing. And if you wanted a longer winter stay where you make it like a 21 night minimum, maybe you get a traveling nurse or someone who needs to be there longer. So that helps too for occupancy.
And then, so once you figure out the customization though, they'll do it for you.
Yeah.
Okay. You just have to select the certain details around it. Okay.
Yeah. And so basically there's that's more in detail, but the base part of it is you put in, hey, here's my base price. Here's my minimum price.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll just take the demand in the area. I don't actually know what it pulls from to figure that out. It might be other Airbnbs. It might look at calendars or events, but they have that figured out on their end.
It'd be nice if they pulled hotel data too, because hotels, right, fluctuate with demand as well.
Do.
Yeah,
right. AirDNA, I mean, I guess has some similar function, and we've looked into that, but it's crazy. That's what's great about networking. You talk about, I've never even heard about this, and Tom and I have 2 Airbnbs, and maybe that's the failure on our part of
it is
lack of,
we haven't followed Avery long enough to figure it out.
That's right. Yeah. Our lack of
that's right. We're going to walk away with
research.
This with tons of tips.
House that in Boston. That first house in Boston, Avery, how did you come up with the money? You were just out of school. How'd you come up with the money? How much was it?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the numbers, but throughout school, I had always been working and I didn't graduate with any college debt. So that was obviously a huge additive. I know some people
good on you.
Set really far back. And I got a pretty decent sized signing bonus at my first job. I think it was like $7,500. Obviously there are taxes after that. And I just been saving up and working throughout school, trying not to really spend. And then as I got my first job, pretty much all I did was drive to work, listen to the podcast, of course, drive home, make food that I bought at the grocery store. And the weekend I read library books. And I didn't really spend any money on anything. I'm sure it was a bit extreme, but it definitely
a little bit, maybe a little bit. But I commend you. I mean, that's discipline. I mean, what you're talking about is true discipline to get where you are. Keep going.
Yeah, I really knew that I wanted it, and so I was just trying to save every penny for it. And the other thing I did at that same time was I started probably the most wild side hustle, where I did lead paint abatement. So in Massachusetts, most states don't really have a big law about lead paint, but essentially if there's children under 6, they could get lead paint poisoning if they're like the flakes or whatever, or dust going in the air. And in Massachusetts, if you're a landlord or an owner and some kid got lead paint poisoning, even if it wasn't your fault, they could sue you for like millions of dollars. So a lot of homeowners will remediate the lead paint. It also helps you get Section 8 tenants. So I kind of just randomly met this guy, ended up getting my license, and he would pay me in cash. And on Saturdays, I would just scrape door jambs and windowsills free of paint. and that covered my groceries and gas. So that helped me save a bit more money too.
Wow.
And anyway, back to the property itself. So $525, I had the 3.5% down payment. So that was about $18,000. There was an additional $10,000 of closing costs, but I ended up getting the seller to pay for about 7,500 of them.
Wow.
So that saved me some money. And that was just through a seller credit at closing. And then it was kind of a dump, like pretty gross. There was mouse poop everywhere. It smelled horrible. They left a bunch of trash everywhere. And so I just learned how to renovate.
Pulled up your sleeves and got to work.
Yeah, I realized I had to live
How
in
long
the
was
house.
that? How long did it take for you to do that?
So kind of a funny story. I did end up having a little bit of funds to be able to pay the person for the upstairs unit to actually renovate that. And we were doing the exact same job. And this is probably the biggest lesson I learned at first was, and I'm sure you're aware that the cheapest labor is the most expensive. So I went with the cheapest guy, and I had never done more than hang up a poster in my dorm room or like, your flag on your wall there. Like that was the most handy thing I'd ever done. We ended up doing basically the same job. I'd put in new flooring, painted, and that was pretty much it. And that's what the guy did upstairs. And he took longer than I did with his assistant to do that, than me in my own unit, which just, he was doing a bunch of crazy things, saying he was sick and had some random like dentist surgery. I remember the assistant called me once and was like, "Hey, have you seen Mike?" Which was his boss. Why am I?
I have not seen your boss. But you might, hold on. Hey, you up there, buddy?
Yeah. So that really was, I mean, I had watched so many of the YouTube videos, which is so helpful. That's why I love YouTube and also wanted to start it. Just it's amazing how much.
It's one of the greatest educators of our time. I think people underestimate the power of YouTube, right? And on it for Google for purchasing it. When everyone heard $5 billion that they bought YouTube, I mean, look what it's grown into, right?
What
Everybody watched
what a
it.
steal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so crazy. But so with that purchase price, my mortgage was $3,300. After all these renovations, I ended up getting a tenant in, and I got a Section 8 tenant upstairs. She's still there. She's great. They paid $2,400, and then I lived in a 2-bedroom. So the upstairs was a 4-bedroom. 2-bedroom, I had a roommate move in. He was paying $800. And then my girlfriend moved in, and some people give me flack for this, but she
charged her. You charged her.
She has to pay. Yeah,
she has to pay. You're a boss, man. My girlfriend would have left me. She'd have been like, "I'm out."
She was so excited though because she was paying $400, and her alternative
what a steal,
was
Avery.
Like $1,000
to live with Avery. $400, man.
She didn't have to find an apartment, pay a broker fee, security deposits, saved a bunch of money.
You wheeled and dealed. I love it, man.
2,400 plus 800, so that's 3,200, so 3,600. So you're profiting 300 plus were they paying utilities on top of that too, or how'd that work?
So they paid the utilities, I paid the water bill, and of course I was doing an odd couple of jobs and fixing up stuff as I was living there. So it probably netted about neutral, but the alternative was that prior to that I was paying $1,100 a month in rent, and I no longer was paying rent. So that really catapulted everything, and I could save way more money. And a year later, I did the exact same thing and saved up. The next down payment was about $25,000.
So now pause there for me. How did you make that transition? I think some people are in your situation where they've purchased a home or purchased a multifamily, right? They're living in part of it, but they don't know how best to qualify for that second mortgage. How did you do it?
Yeah, so the first thing I had to make sure that I did was refinance out of the FHA loan so I could use it again. So that's the first thing I did. And then my lender that I was working with just said, as long as you have leases in place that cover your debt, you're fine. And I even though I didn't have the 2 years of history, this is just what he said. And with the FHA loan, even when you're buying your first property, if you have no rental income history for your new one, they will take into account the other rent to lower your debt to income. So I pretty much was just pre-approved for, again, about what I was looking for. So really what it was just the fact that I had strong rental income from the duplex, and then the 3-family or triplex that I ended up buying also had pretty strong rental income.
Now,
I don't know if that's a great answer, because I know some people are in certain situations where they feel like they can't get out of it, or maybe they need the rental history. So it could just be talk to a different guy or lender, or maybe you have to wait until you have that history of rental income.
So you're saying it might be the education of the lender.
Oh, I mean, you think about how many real estate agents are out there that are
thousands.
Yeah. It's the barrier to entry to work a lot of these jobs isn't crazy high.
It's $1,200 and get a 70 on a test. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who don't necessarily know what they're doing. So if you have someone who's done that before, so the guy that I worked with that was the lender, basically all he did was represent buyers who were doing small multi-house hacks. So he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, he knew how to get through it. Now, would we be able to do the exact same thing if it was an Airbnb? You're not living in it. Let's say you're renting a place, you know, on your own, or you've purchased a home, you're living in a home. This is your Airbnb property. Can it be looked at similarly to having long-term leases?
Do you mean if you were to like live in part of it and rent the other out on Airbnb, or are you just talking about buying?
Yeah, let's say Airbnb. No, it's rented out on Airbnb.
Yeah, you could totally do that. There's a guy called Craig Kurlop. I don't know if you're familiar. He wrote a book called The House Hacking Strategy. So I think he didn't pioneer the term house hacking, but he wrote the first book on it. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. Also a Bigger Pockets guy. But when he did his first one, he had a 1-bedroom and a 1-bedroom. He rented that out, long-term rent upstairs. He lived in the 1-bedroom, but he lived in the living room, and then he rented out his bedroom on Airbnb.
Wow, what a boss. Okay.
Don't mind me. You got to walk by me to get to the bedroom.
Exactly.
Yeah. He did put up a curtain, so there was.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
it's impressive. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to Airbnb my bedroom out.
So basically, you were able to get 2 FHA loans, right? The first, and then this next one. And did you moved into the next one, correct?
Yeah, I moved into the next one. There were some pretty strict things that I had to sign that read, you know, if you don't move in, you could owe us $1 million. Your loan is due at when we figure out you're not living there. So obviously didn't want to commit mortgage fraud, and I don't condone mortgage fraud because I know a lot of people who will do the whole FHA thing and either not move in or rent it all out right away.
Now that's the same, not only FHA, but if you do conventional too, right? And they find out you didn't move in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not worth the risk from my standard. People do it, but I would never recommend doing that.
Okay.
No, do it by the book.
That's right. That's right.
If you don't pay it up front, you'll pay it later.
So now as far as the laws there, you do the FHA. How long is it you have to live in it before you can move out and just fully rent it?
So it's usually a year, but there are extenuating circumstances. So.
And then per state by state, I imagine.
No, that's a national.
Is it?
product.
Okay.
So let's say, you know, you have a baby and you live in a 1-bedroom. So you're like, oh, I need a bigger apartment. So they would let you move early, or maybe you move jobs to a different state, or just like certain circumstances where they would let you do the 1 year earlier. I mean, if you were someone who really liked to job hop and city hop, and you were like, hey, I'm just going to get a job for 6 months in Boston and then Denver and then Austin, you could do it faster. Wow. That's obviously a lot of moving. So
yes, it is.
So how long did you live in this triplex?
So I lived in the duplex for the year, and then I lived in the triplex. So it was March 2019 when I bought the duplex, and then I moved into it in like April. And then for the triplex, I purchased it in May of 2020. And then I moved out, and I think it was about May of 2021, right before I moved down here to Durham.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So about a year in each one.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volume too. I know from Tom and I's instance, we bought our first Airbnb. We bought 2 last year, and we bought our first one in April. We closed in April 2022. And I just wanted more, like more right now. Like you mentioned earlier, like I bought one, I should be a millionaire, but it took you made that first investment that first year, and took you a whole year to save up for your next one. And that was with the 3.5% down payment loan. You know, not everyone can get that FHA loan. That patience is incredible. And that stamina, and like Tom mentioned, discipline, it really comes into play with real estate. It's not all going to snowball at once. Can you talk about that a little bit? Do you just have to have the plan in your head the whole time? I mean,
I think that for sure you hit it right on the head there, that it's not a get rich quick game. There's a guy, Rod Cleef, who he often says, you know, this isn't a get rich quick game. It's a get really freaking wealthy over time game. And that's definitely true. Like you'll hit the curve that, you know, it's going slowly, and it just exponentially will go up as time goes on, because you'll start building all this equity. There's cash flow from multiple different buildings, and things just start happening. but it's definitely slow at first, depending on what you're doing. There are people that I know that, and I don't know how much of each property they have, but if you can be someone who uses a lot of other people's money and buys big apartment complexes, I'm sure you could get there. But that's a very active job, and you're working with other people's money. You know, there's a lot more scrutiny, SECs involved.
Absolutely.
So that's more of a full-time job than, not saying doing landlording or real estate investing is nothing, but it's a lot more passive than an active 9 to 5. So,
Which do you use a property manager for any of your properties, or are you the acting property manager for all of them?
yeah, so even the ones in Boston, I still manage.
Okay.
And then all my Airbnbs I manage. I don't know what they would do if I had a property manager, I guess, especially for the long-term rentals, because I pretty much interact. I'd say it's a couple hours a month at most.
Okay.
To manage those. And then the nice thing about being in a big city for renting your place out is typically a broker would be doing it anyway. So if I need to rent the place out or find a new tenant, I just talk to the broker, and then they're doing the showings and everything. And then the tenant is used to, because that's what the market has, paying a broker fee, which sucks for the tenant, but it's what it is.
Yeah. I think for Keaton and me, it's worked out. We have a property manager that handles Virginia, our home in Virginia, because it's more active, but the cabin we manage ourselves. But I think it's been nice because both of us have full-time jobs, other stuff. We've got 4 children. I think that's been helpful, at least for us. I would ideally love to get to a point where that's my full-time job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess, Avery, we haven't asked, but do you do anything beyond real estate that does take up your time?
Yeah, so I do still have a 9 to 5. I work for a small insurance company. They sell annuities out here in Durham, and I'm a project or product manager. And I used to do data analytics, which aligned with the whole math degree and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up getting this job because, not that I was networking on purpose, but playing in a rec sports league, soccer league, and then the kids that I was playing with, his dad was the CEO of this company, and he's like, "Hey, you're a cool dude if you want a job." So
nice.
You were shoving these kids to the ground, and running over them, and the dad's like, "That's the guy I want." Yeah.
I need him on my team right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was my question I had on the tip of my tongue too. You've held a 9 to 5 this whole time. Does it ever drive, like me? It drives me crazy. I want to get to the point, like Tom says, where we're in our investments full time. Does it drive you crazy? Do you have a plan?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a plan. It's really hard for me to want to give up my paycheck just because I hope no one's listening. Like, it's not that difficult to keep and do the work. And it's also a hybrid model, and it gets me out of the house because I still go to the office a couple days a week. Nice to talk to people. I don't have kids or a dog or anything. So like I have very little responsibilities. My girlfriend's getting her PhD, so she's working really hard. And even when I come home, I still make my videos, and I'm like, what else am I going to do? Kind of. I don't know what else I would do.
I think I'm going to start calling you Elon Musk. It sounds like you're somebody who just like, I don't know. I love working. It's enjoyable, right? Which is really good. I think it's a good attitude to have. I think too many go into entrepreneurship of starting their own business, and they think they've got to just give up the 9 to 5 right away. But what it comes down to is, we've talked about it a few times with discipline, and Avery, you're a freaking hard worker, man. I've realized you work your butt off for this stuff, sacrificed, and a lot of discipline. Yeah. I'm just really impressed.
Yeah. I mean, I think, that really sums it up. I've never been the smartest or brightest, but I like to pride myself on working hard and asking a lot of questions, always being curious. So I think that's helped a lot. And then really the other piece of the job, and maybe an exit strategy, is, like I said, my girlfriend's getting her PhD. When she actually has a job, I can get on her health insurance, and that would say a little bit of money.
There you go.
Well, let me come back to the investment here. What do you, when you're out shopping around on investments, what do you specifically look for in an investment property, whether it's a long-term lease or it's an Airbnb type investment? What do you look for? Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, so definitely 2 very different things for long-term and short-term. For the long-term piece, I think the most important thing I look at is location. I think a lot of people get swept up in the hype, especially on social media of like, hey, I have 30 units or I have 100 units, and you realize this person owns a bunch of $60,000 houses or whatever, and they may or may not make them $100 a month in cash flow from a long-term rent. And if they have to replace the roof on it, they've lost 5-10 years of cash flow. So you can have good locations, obviously, in less expensive area or in inexpensive areas. But what I think has been really good, so I own the duplex and triplex in the Boston area. In Durham, I have a 4-family that I actually purchased with partners. And that one is in like the most prime location in Durham. And so every time I've rented out any of these places, like I just rented out that place in Durham. It's a studio apartment. I listed it on a Friday. I had a lease signed and deposit by Wednesday.
Wow.
Because I had over 100 people reach out to me and like 20 applications within that period of time.
Jeez, you just kind of cover your eyes and okay, this guy.
And I saw that on one of your videos. I think it was 8 points. I can't remember how many points it was.
Yeah.
Oh, to what to ask?
How the vet, so you don't spend time with 100 people.
Right.
Yeah. So talk about that. You said this was it a 4-plex here?
Yeah.
That you went in. How'd you find these partners? How did it work logistically with them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this one are relatives, and I guess I've had the track record, and they've seen what I've been doing. So they're like, hey, I don't want to do any of because most people associate owning property with terribleness. So like, we don't want to do any of that. You can do it, and we'll fund the investment. You get equity percentage, we get equity percentage. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome to me.
I would love to do that.
So they funded it 100%, and you just do all the work.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I found the deal. I did the whole transaction,
brokered it, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, found the right people to buy it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like 100% passive on their end, and I did all the annoying, terrible stuff.
Now, how did you decide on like percentages? I mean, when you're using 100% of someone else's money, and is it 2 partners, 1 partner?
There are a couple of people.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
So yeah, how did you determine ownership? Let's say in that.
We split it based on their end. They split it based off of how much funds they put in.
Sure.
And then on my end, we ended up, because there's 4 of us, so it was 25%. So the rest of them were 75%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was split equally between the 4 of you.
Well, they have their own splits.
Got it. So you just got your 25. Their 75 is split up based on the amount that they put in. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think there's a perfect scenario or way that you can do it. Sometimes people might just want, I know people who do a lot more of this exclusively where they use other folks' money. Maybe they just want hey, you give me $100,000 at 6% and I just pay you monthly. And then when I cash out refinance, I'll pay you the rest. Other people want equity. You might have a partner where, let's say it's a $100,000 place. You're both putting in $50,000. So it's 50-50. Or one person ends up managing it. So they put in the 60, the other puts in the 40, but the person with the 60 is managing. So there's a lot of ways that you could split it. I don't think there's one perfect size fits all. It just really depends on what that person wants out of it. Like, hey, do they just want some quick, easy cash flow?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they actually want the long-term, hey, I'll stick with it. I believe in this person and the property.
Now, how someone like you, who writes your contracts? Are you guys using an attorney? Are you using an online service? Who's helping you maybe come up with that partnership, right? I mean, you're doing the real estate transaction, but there's still a backside LLC or something, right? That you're functioning through.
Yeah, of course. So LLC was created, attorney helps draw it up, and it's pretty simple. It's just you have an LLC and then says who owns what, and it's just a couple of sentences.
No, sure. But I mean, are you using do you have a specific attorney you like, or are you going to an online attorney? Stuff like that. Yeah.
So for these transactions, to create your LLC, I just do that. I just created one for my recent Airbnb. Mm-hmm. I just do that myself online. Your Secretary of State, and then the one in the website, Secretary of State NC. I just do that there. The actual written down, hey, we should get this signed thing, just do that with the closing attorney.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. But Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say transitioning. So you have now I forgot. What'd you start with? The duplex?
Yeah.
You started with the duplex, then you got the triplex, and then you're in with this quadplex or quad with investors. What else do you have? Do you have next are the Airbnbs, or do you have more?
Next is a 5-plex. That's the transition.
That's where you're trending.
I wish. When I was looking for, so actually the way it worked, it was duplex, triplex. Right now I live in a single family home and I have a detached garage. So people have pushed me to want to, finish that out and rent it out. I haven't yet. Might be on the horizon, but I did that.
Keaton, you just did that.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Keaton just did that. He just finished out his side garage.
I'm furnishing it right now, and we're to short-term rental it. Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. You'll have to tell me how it was.
Yeah, we'll.
Yeah. So I did that because when I was down here, I wanted to do the same thing, buy a small house hack, but there's not that much multifamily in the Durham area. I mean, there's some, but not as much. And the ones that were available were in what I was told, not really good places to live.
Yeah.
So I ended up just trying to do, right now it's like a live and flip, where I bought a really crappy house in a really nice neighborhood, been fixing it up over time. And if you live in the place for 2 years, you can sell it for up to the $250K in tax-free capital gains. Not that I think I'd get that in 2 years, but that was pretty much the play for this one. I don't know if I'll sell it right away. I might end up just holding on to it forever anyway, if I'm going to get the garage all set up and rent it out, because it is in a really good location. But anyway, after that one, I wanted to utilize my 10% down second home loan. So in April of 22, I bought the place in Pinehurst for Airbnb. That was a pretty big project, and the first project where I didn't do any of the renovations myself. So that was kind of a big step. And one I loved because I didn't have to do any of the work and someone else did it. So that was nice. Obviously, it cost more money to do that, but it made things go a lot faster. And then that one's been running and doing really well now for a little bit of time, and it's a good spot to have. And then and then it was the 4-family in September of last year. And then in January, so like a month ago, I closed on that cabin about 30 minutes north of me, and I listed it. It was last Monday it went live, and I already have 14 bookings, which is insane.
That's awesome. Wow.
And and what draws people? Why'd you choose the area you did? You said the strategy for your long-term rentals and your short-term rentals are really different. Tell us about the short-term rentals.
Yeah, so that first short-term one, really the reason why I bought it is because I did a podcast with a guy 2 years ago, and he owned one there. So when I moved down here, I was like, it's like an hour away. It checks the box for a second home loan. Seems like a nice place. All the housing stock is pretty new, so it's probably easy to manage. So I guess that one was a little more random, but what I definitely look for in short-term rentals is some type of amenity, either you have to build or in the location, that makes your place stand out. Like why does someone want to book it versus all the other competition? So that one specifically, other than the fact that I renovated it and it's like very beautiful high-end home, is on the golf course. So it's a big golf area. So people can sit on the back deck and watch people tee off and stuff. So that's a big additive. The other thing that I'm really interested in the short-term space, which sounds like you guys are doing with the cabin, is all those unique stays and kind of off-grid stuff seems to be really popular, like tree houses, tiny homes, cabins, and all that. So I was looking for a place that had a lot of land and that I could add that stuff to. So I have this cabin, and I added the hot tub and fire pit so that, there's a reason we're coming to the cabin. At least it's not necessarily just the cabin. So that I think has helped a lot. And then the rest of the acreage, I'm planning on adding tiny homes and tree houses and kind of building out a whole getaway, if you've heard of that brand. And just like a big thing out there that there'd just be a bunch of places for people to stay.
So do you team up with, we know Getaway. Yeah. Do you team up with Getaway, or is it you're just doing your own version of it?
Just my own version. I stayed there like a year or two ago, and I was like, I feel like I could easily do this, and it's got to be pretty inexpensive for them, especially at scale, to set all this up. Because the one I went to was in Ashboro, and I'm like, this isn't like, there's nothing around here. It's it's just a random.
I almost booked that one. I know exactly where you're talking about. So are you planning to build it? Like they basically, it looks like they rolling in on a big bed trailer and they build it from that. I mean, or are you going to have it prefabbed? How are you going to have it done?
Yeah, so I found this. I'm looking for like Nordic style, cabin style tiny homes, not necessarily the modern looking ones. I found some guy on Instagram who does an awesome job. He's out of Eastern Tennessee. So he delivers here, and that's pretty much what I would do. And then I would need someone to obviously set up all the utilities on my end, because they come, you could get them furnished if you want, but I would do my own furnishing. But you can get them with the HVAC, like mini split setup.
Mhm.
All of the plumbing and electrical, so that someone would hook it up from the utilities. So I obviously had to get someone to hook up
Pull
that
the utilities out there. Yeah. And so talking about that, is there any restriction to how many you can have out there? Do you know about, can you have 20? I mean, if you have 10 acres or what are the land restrictions?
Zoning restrictions, maybe.
Zoning,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so it is kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I did call the county and they said that there was pretty much no issue with kind of doing what you want. I don't know how many that exactly meant. The only thing they said I had to do was to make sure I did an environmental report, because they can only have so much septic for a certain area. But they're like, yeah, you could easily do a number of them. It was kind of their response. So I don't have an exact number yet, and I still have to do that environmental report, but I know I can at least do like 3 or 4.
And where did you get I mean, how much do you have to pay for this in full, or is it able to be financed, the tiny homes?
The tiny homes, I actually haven't spoken to the guy about it in terms of how they do financing, but I was planning with those to just hopefully save up and pay for them. I just thought that kind of made sense in my head. Maybe it doesn't, or be able to utilize, because I'm planning on, as soon as I get my tax return in so that my debt to income ratio looks really good, get a home equity line of credit on the home that I'm in, and hopefully buy some long-term like multifamily, but then maybe can use other funds for either the detached garage or these tiny homes.
And let's dive into that real quick. The HELOC, the home equity line of credit. Can you, for our 10 viewers out there that we don't even have yet? So yeah, don't worry about your bosses, what you said about your job. But for your HELOC, how does that work? I mean, that's a great idea and how you're going to use it to gain more wealth. But how does that work, the HELOC?
Yeah, so they're the easiest to get on your primary residence. You can get them on secondary and investment properties. But essentially, you get like a credit card in a way of money that is a lien against your property. So let's say you have a $500,000 house and you owe $300,000. A bank, especially with your primary home, might even give you up to 100% of your value. Some of them will only do 80% of your value. So in that scenario, that's the $400,000. And then they'll take the difference between what your loan is and what the value of your house is. So in that scenario, with my $300,000 loan and my $500,000 house, a bank might give me a line of credit from $100,000 to $200,000. If I ever sold the house, then I'd have to pay it all back. So if you're not, you don't just open one and then go buy something. And theoretically, if you sell the house, you should be able to pay it off, but maybe not with all the fees and everything. But you just draw from that line of credit, and most credit unions or banks will give you an interest only. So let's say you have $100,000, and they'll fluctuate. They're usually variable rate, so they'll fluctuate with whatever's going on in the market and the Fed. So it's like an 8-5-10% rate, like somewhere in between there. And when you draw out the money, you're paying monthly interest-only payments. If you're paying principal and interest-only payments, I always find that very interesting, because the principal you're paying is going directly back into your account, and you could just draw it out immediately.
That's right. Yeah, just going back to the mortgage, right?
Want you to do that. But pretty much it's just an easy way to get debt out of your property without having to do a cash out refinance, because usually they're either between like $0 or $500 to get at a bank, because they might just do an appraisal. And then that way you don't increase the loan on the property that you've taken out the home equity line of credit with, like you would have done with a cash out refinance. And then you can just use that money as you wish. And you have 10 years of that draw period, and then you'd have to theoretically pay it all back after that 10 years, but you could just get another home equity line of credit
and pay it off.
Yeah. So it's like an infinite cycle of
Yeah,
debt.
take it from one pocket, put it to the other pocket, right?
And what you're specifically doing to increase the value of the home equity line of credit you can get, you bought the crappy home in the good area and you've been fixing it up, right? At all by yourself, right? I'm assuming, I don't know if you contract any work out, but that really is growing that HELOC, or that the amount you can potentially take out, correct? And you can invest elsewhere.
Yeah, 100%. The area I think has been the most important. I mean, I have done a lot of jobs suck. I am very much over the DIY life. It takes so much time. But yeah, I painted my house, got renovated the bathrooms, and other things. But I'm not really itching always to do a bunch of projects. If I have a friend who's like, "Hey, you want to do a backsplash this weekend at my house?" I'm like, "Sure," but
you're my friend, so I'll help if I have to. But backsplash at my house, I'm hiring that guy.
Pretty much, yeah.
No, and I think you've earned it, right? I think you get to a point where I think a lot of people that want to get into real estate think that they've got to hire the subcontractor and do some other things, and so they get scared by the capital they might need. But I think you're a great example of you can DIY some stuff. You can get some stuff done if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
The HELOC's interesting because, Keaton, it's like I think about our Virginia property and maybe doing something like that, because obviously we added some amenities. We built a fireplace in the back. We turned one of the rooms into a theater room and put a big 120-inch screen in it to try to give it some pizzazz. But maybe after a year or something, we can look at that value and see if there's potential to roll it and buy something else.
The only caveat I'll say about a home equity line of credit that I don't think people always say or think about is that when you open that, let's say you get a $100,000 home equity line of credit and you're trying to buy a new property and you're utilizing the $100,000 as a down payment, and you're buying a $500,000 house, so you would get a $400,000 loan in this scenario. When a lender is looking at your debt to income, even if you didn't use it, let's say you also had $100,000 elsewhere, like real money. Not that HELOC isn't real money, but they'll just assume that you've drawn on your HELOC and they'll add that to your debt.
Right.
So what often people might do is, if they wouldn't qualify from the debt to income perspective, is get that home equity line of credit and pair it with a DSCR, or debt service coverage ratio loan, so that that isn't really an issue.
Another hack. Okay.
The DSCR is the 20% down, right?
Yeah, and they'll just pretty much, well, it depends on the bank, but most banks will say, hey, as long as the appraisal rent comes in at or above the mortgage, you qualify. We don't care about your income or credit or any of that.
Yeah, that's what's nice about those. So we're getting close, Avery, and we haven't even talked about how me and Tom found you, your social media. I know your real estate has driven you to learn a lot of this, and you've self-educated, and you, like you said, you poured weekends into reading. Tell us a little bit about your social media. Again, that's how we found you, and what really piqued our interest, and we're so grateful that you shared your time with us tonight. But what got you into the social media? Does it bring in revenue? From what platforms does it provide?
Sure. I think there's so much to talk about with social media, and I'm definitely slightly burnt out about it, but I'm still trying to keep doing it. So I started in January of 2021, like I mentioned earlier. And that actually really stemmed because I was doing some podcasts, and I found that I always wanted to say more, or I would say something and say, oh, that'd be a really good video. So I started making the YouTube videos, and that kind of, like, the fourth video I made is my most viewed video, has like 240,000 views on YouTube. So I thought I was really cool and like the best YouTuber ever. Obviously not the case, but things kind of slowed down a little bit. And at first, like my first month that I was monetized on YouTube, I made $700, and I was thinking, wow, this is amazing. If it keeps going up in the same fashion, this could be something real. Because you look at guys like Graham Stephan who are making, millions a year just from ad revenue, not even taking into account affiliate marketing or brand deals and all that stuff. So 2021 kept going along. And then I have a couple of friends who do social media. One of my friends has, millions of followers, and he's very good at it. And he started doing TikTok, and I think it was about July or June of 2021, and he just started getting like a boatload of followers. So I said, you know what, I might as well give it a try. So I gave it a try in about October of 21, started getting a decent amount of followers. And then through 2022, did the same thing, tried to keep up with the YouTube once a week, and then pretty much just repost everything that's on TikTok to Instagram. Sometimes I do Facebook Reels, but it's just a lot of effort to, I wish someone else would do it.
Yeah.
Post everything. So pretty much the revenue that I can at least talk about 2022 mainly came from TikTok. So pre-recession scares, which was like May of 2022, brands would just pay you whatever. They didn't even think about the return. So for example, I did 3 videos and got paid $7,000 for it.
Wow.
Just on TikTok.
Just on TikTok. Yeah.
And we're talking videos of like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Avery. I love this story. Tell me more. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready to make 3 videos on TikTok.
I know it's pretty insane, because usually the going rate for TikTok is for every 100,000 followers you have, you can charge $1,000 per. So my friend who has, I think he's got like 2.2 million followers now, he's charging 20, 30 grand a video. So, you know, he does 2-3 of those a month. Plus he has a lot of other things going on. He quit his job earlier this year.
That's
Sure.
awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there was pretty much that. And then it did slow down a little bit once brands freaked out, and a lot of crypto companies would reach out to me prior to like everything crashing a little bit. So there's a lot less of that going on, but brand deals are a big thing. I do them now for usually somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a video. But I don't do nearly as many as I did, because 1, less people are reaching out, and 2, I'm not as focused on it so much. I don't care too much about making a brand video on TikTok and feeling like a sellout, because 98% of the time when you make a video, TikTok doesn't show it to your followers. But on Instagram, I care a lot more, because I feel like those people are actually interested and see my stuff more often. So I try not to do it there.
Hey, I'm on YouTube and Instagram. I just, it's easy to flip through a lot of Avery's content on TikTok. It's like 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. Then I get caught in the 2000th video I've come across,
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. That was the biggest driver. I think I did like 35,000 last year with the brand deals. Then there's affiliate marketing, which some have gone well, some not as well. One, for example, I had you sign up for, I think it was a stock platform. There's a incentive for the person to sign up, and then I make $60 if you sign up. So that's a bit more passive. There are other ones that I've done like that. If I do story shout outs on Instagram, it's usually a couple $100, an Instagram reel, like $1,000. But I've really tried to push a lot more. I have a mentorship program, which has been really awesome. I would love if that were my full-time job. Some people, like the people who are in it, I know love it and get a lot of value and say like, wow, this was really worth it. But I have a hard time actually getting people to be there, because I'm not the best salesman, because I think I'm too honest when I talk to people. But
and Dawson, if you could show that, it'd be great. I know that's in your Instagram profile, the link to your mentorship program. But yeah, what is your mentorship program?
Yeah, so it's all about buying your first rental. And there's a Discord group where pretty active. People are always asking questions. And then we do a Zoom call every other week. And then there's a course associated with it. So that one's a bit more focused on the house hacking. But a few of the people in the program didn't actually house hack. They just bought a long-term rental. Like one lady bought a duplex, and actually a month later, she bought a single family that she's doing Furnish Finder. And then another guy, he bought a single family. He lives in New York, but he bought it in North Carolina. So I kind of helped him with the whole out-of-state thing and like long distance thing. So that's been pretty fun and just cool to see them have some success and say, oh, this really wasn't that scary. I was super scared about it, but I think people just really appreciate having someone they can kind of text to say, hey, is this cool?
Hey, can you give this the smell test?
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I love really that. Cool. Yeah. And obviously you're a giver, because you give you don't know us from anywhere, and you
Mhm.
agreed to be on and give us more than an hour of your time. So we are so appreciative of that. One thing we always like to ask at the end, if you were to do it all over again, I mean, you're so young in the game still, but if you were to do it all over again, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, I think the two biggest things, they probably are one thing, because one was within business and one was in my personal life. And I figured it out within a couple of years, was just not be so cheap. And the most important thing, like making money is pretty cool, obviously, and getting things that you want or feeling more comfortable financially, or not worrying about spending $7 at a bar for a beer. But just being cool with, hey, I'm going to hang out with my friends, because relationships are the most important thing in the end. Like, you can make all the money you want, but it's kind of irrelevant. So don't be cheap in that regard. Like, hang out with your friends, family. I mean, you can do it in less expensive ways, of course, but just don't be cheap in that way. Like, maybe sometimes I wouldn't want to go out to dinner with friends because I said, hey, I'm just saving money. Which, speaking of funny fact, I listened to a podcast where a guy would bring his own Subway sandwiches to Michelin star restaurants in downtown Manhattan so he could save money. I don't know if I'd do that, but
I don't think so.
Not being cheap there, and also just not being cheap with the materials that I spent. So on my duplex, I bought used appliances that were very used, and bought the cheapest faucets, the cheapest everything, and they all broke in a year. So I bought them again pretty much.
Yep,
Yeah.
the most expensive thing you'll buy is the cheapest. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. What is the saying? Buy it right or buy it twice.
Yeah. The cheap, and like the cheapest electrician always the most expensive, or you never go with the cheap guy.
No, but I really appreciate the advice. That's actually very unique to the other 5 business owners and people that, we've met people just as successful a little bit more, but that advice of relationships, I think relationships goes a huge way. In fact, some of your biggest portions that we'll probably pull from this podcast to share even snippets of are the network piece, right? I think you can't do it by yourself. I think there's a wealth of knowledge to be captured from a ton of people out there. And you, Avery, have given me and Keaton, I'm sure Keaton after this call is going to be like, dude, Tom, let's start talking about Airbnb. And let's, you got 15 minutes. Let's talk more about it, because you've given us a lot to think about. We hope the listeners have gotten a ton out of what you've shared. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for even responding to one of probably thousands of messages you get from Keaton. So appreciate it.
Yeah, no, and again, it really stood out to me just because it resonates so much with me, the whole what it takes. And like I said at the beginning, people always talk to me and are complaining about, hey, I can't afford to buy a house, and they make a lot of money, and I look at it, I'm like, why? And they're spending all this money on all these things, and they want all of the vacations and all of the everything, and they also want to buy the nicest house at the top of their budget, but they don't have the down payment. I'm like, well, something's got to give. So like, what does it take?
Mhm.
If you can't do a vacation and spend $2,000-3,000 every weekend if you want something. So
choose your hard, right? It'll be hard either way on you. So choose your hard and look at the long run. Well, thank you. You have given us so much. We appreciate it so much. Like I said, you're a giver 100%. I think your social media, I don't know if you do it just for the money. I don't think so. Like you said, on Instagram, you want to keep that authentic and valuable information and not be just a sellout. I truly think you're a giver. And like you said, you might be, I don't think you're a bad salesman, but if your best quality is you're too honest, or your worst quality, that's a pretty dang good quality.
Very, very good.
So thank you so much, Avery. We appreciate it. Please let us know once we get 20 followers instead of 2, what we can, when we're big time, what we can do for you. We'd love to help out in any way.
Yeah. No, again, I really appreciate you reaching out. It was fun to be on here. I always like talking about it, and you guys have a good setup, and cool to see you're also in North Carolina. So
awesome. Hey, thanks, Avery. And Dawson, we'll let you hit it, man.